In trauma-based mind control, trauma is used to hack into the mind and body's defense systems in order to train a person's behavior. This is accomplished in 3 steps. In step 1, the victim's identity is destroyed. This is achieved by depriving the victim of their basic needs and inflicting pain upon them until they become exhausted, confused, and disoriented. In this state, they no longer trust themselves and become receptive to guidance from an outside authority. Step 2, through a strict system of rewards and punishments, the victim is imprinted with a new identity. The new identity is trained to self-isolate by having it denounce everything associated with the previous identity. And finally, with step 3, through the continued use of trauma, the rebuilding of the victim's new self is crafted and maintained however the mind controller chooses. For this to work, the subject must remain oblivious to the fact that they are being trained. This is accomplished by keeping them in a helpless victim state of mind with the use of trauma. The entire method requires regular ritualistic abuse to keep the target in the victim state. Declassified documents show how drugs and sensory overload are used to inflict trauma upon the public. But high-level slaves are often procured from families with an established history of child abuse. Intergenerational or multi-generational trauma abuse is when a person abuses their child, and that child grows up to abuse their child, and that person grows up to abuse their child, and so on. This increases a person's susceptibility to trauma-based mind control. Experiments with mice have shown that the offspring of a traumatized pregnant mother are born depressed and exhibit problems socializing with others. A nurturing upbringing by a healthy surrogate mother did not reverse the abnormal behaviors, indicating an in utero transformation of the brain. And bioinformatic analysis revealed long-lasting alterations in the DNA. This is why the CIA is known for targeting children from families of multi-generational child abuse. They are easier to mind control. This is why world leaders are all from the same bloodlines. This brutal technique has been used and understood for centuries. And if a group of people vying for power wanted a loyal army of soldiers, the easiest way would be by breeding them. And the evidence shows that this is how our society was created. From the middle of the 19th century and well into the next, hundreds of thousands of orphans were distributed and sold in the United States, and millions worldwide. They were advertised, delivered by train, and sold at fairs. In America, these orphans were being managed and distributed by a private organization from Britain known as the Odd Fellows, many of whom were orphans themselves. The Ancient Order of Odd Fellows is an international fraternity whose members, such as Albert Pike and several U.S. presidents during the orphan train years, were often members of Freemasonic lodges as well. With their first official lodge in the United States established in 1819, the Odd Fellows are officially committed to educating orphans, but they seem to have been procuring them and breeding them as well. The Odd Fellows' first female chapter, the Daughters of Rebecca, was founded right before the orphan trains began, and a depiction of their work shows hints of mass breeding and surrogate motherhood. They worked closely with the Odd Fellows at large institutions known as orphan asylums and foundling asylums, where many members themselves were born. The Rothschild banking dynasty provided funding for several of these orphan asylums. According to Philip Eugene de Rothschild, the family has privately bred over 100,000 offspring, including Adolf Hitler. This is why is so prevalent among the families of world leaders. While it is used for extortion, its primary function is for trauma-based mind control. Because to the mind controller, trauma equals transformation, and there is nothing more traumatizing to a person. If you had 1 million mind control slaves placed in positions of power, then you could control entire nations, but only if the masses were also kept in a relative state of trauma.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here tonight to arm yourselves with knowledge about a tool that's being covertly used to usher in what Adolf Hitler and George Bush termed New World Order, and that's mind control.
a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations.
Trauma-based mind control can be traced back for millennia, but we can find its research in modern times in the Tavistock Institute of London and the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Germany. The Nazis were studying occult families engaged in multi-generational. They found that children were receptive to external mind control and could develop enhanced physical abilities such as photographic memory, physical stamina, and up to 44 times visual acuity. They were raising children in laboratories to create a super race of humans. Operation Paperclip was a secret program where the U.S. imported more than 1,600 Nazi scientists after World War II, some of whom went on to continue their work in trauma-based mind control. This information first made its way into the public on August 3, 1977, during congressional hearings into the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control program. It is interesting to note that Dr. Louis Jolyon West, a leading expert in the CIA's MK-Ultra program, was also the lead psychiatrist for Jack Ruby, Patty Hearst, Sirhan Sirhan, and Oklahoma City Timothy McVeigh. In 1988, CIA agent Mark Phillips rescued Kathy O'Brien from the MK-Ultra program. They provided documented testimony for the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on Intelligence Oversight in 1995. But for reasons of national security, she was not able to address the congressional committee, so she became a whistleblower.
That I developed dissociative identity disorder. It certainly was incomprehensible. There was no place for it in my mind to deal with such horror. Therefore, I developed a compartment in my brain, a little area behind amnesic barriers that was actually the neuron pathway shutting down in my brain in order to compartmentalize the memory of abuse so that the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. This criminal faction of our government was so interested in dissociative identity disordered persons, they knew that any child trauma so horrible that they had to be suffering from that disorder. Therefore, this criminal faction of our government sanctioned this child be ring so that they could identify and target children such as myself for the project.
Whistleblower Bryce Taylor has made very similar claims. Kathy O'Brien claimed that her handler, former Klansman and Senator Robert Byrd, was in complete control of her. In 1995, President Bill Clinton's Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experimentation included testimonies from Congress from child victims involved in trauma-based mind control, who claimed and kept in cages when they were small children.
I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. I was in what looked like a laboratory and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Dr. Green moved on to wanting me to dolls that looked like real children. He often tied me down in a cage, which was near his office,
and claimed they were used to blackmail powerful politicians when they were only 9 years old.
I became a pawn in the government scheme. His ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all for the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing. I can only summarize my circumstances by saying they took an already a year-old child and compounded my suffering beyond belief. The saddest part is, I know for a fact that I was not alone. There were countless other children in my same situation, and there was no one to help us. And it was Richard Helms, who was Deputy Director of the CIA, Dr. Gottlieb, Captain George White, Morris Allen, who all planned on filming as many high government agency officials and heads of academic institutions and foundations as possible. I was used to entrap many unwitting men, including themselves, all with the use of a hidden camera. I was only 9 years old.